All right, but today we are going through the book of Philippians. We're in chapter 4 of 4, so we're in the last chapter of Philippians. We're going to be looking at verses 6 through 9. Now, the way that verse 6 starts is it's very famous. If you guys have memorized any verse or you have heard people recite verses from the book of Philippians, this probably is one of them. Okay, and you heard it so often that you're like, okay, yeah, I memorized this. Even though I don't want to memorize it, I memorized it because people tell you. Like, you're having a bad day. Philippians 4, verse 4. Okay, verse 4. Okay, here we go. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Have you guys heard of this before? Now, there's a cultural context to this. In the days 2,000 years ago, around the time when Paul wrote this letter, there was a way to basically promote your own religion, your own deity and stuff like that. And one of the ways they did it was through a Main Street parade, not an electrical parade, just a parade. And they would make noise. They'll be like, hey, it reminds me of that scene from Aladdin when Genie is like, hail to the conquering hero, da 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 da. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's kind of like that. Like they would make noise on the streets. And so the word rejoice here, it doesn't just mean like, oh, I feel this joy inside of me. And it's like you're making noise. Okay, that's what this word means. So he's like, rejoice always in the Lord. Like your God died and resurrected. That's cause for celebration. You guys should rejoice. But then the next line kind of contradicts it, which is this. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. So what he's saying here is like, hey, it's okay to be obnoxious and celebrate as long as you're respectful for the people around you. So basically, the first two verses is this. Celebrate what God has done. That's good. Like, make noise if you have to, but do it in a respectful manner, please, right? Not in an obnoxious way that can offend other people. So that's cool. Now, remember, when this letter was written, it was written to a group of people in Philippi where the Roman Empire was like, we don't like these Christians, so they're always persecuting them. So while people want to celebrate, some people have faced a lot of criticism. Some of them have been tortured, right? And so when Paul says, I want you to rejoice, have a good time, right? As long as you're respectful to your neighbors, just do it, go have fun. But what if I can't celebrate? Meaning, I've had a really tough year. Like, there was a death in my family, and Paul, how insensitive you, Paul. What, you're going to write some books in the Bible? Ooh, big whoop, right? Like, you're telling me to rejoice when I just had a really bad week? Or like, I'm suffering from sickness and you want me to rejoice? How? Paul, do you know what I'm going through? And Paul does know what they're going through. Like, Paul, I'm going through a divorce right now. My relationship, my significant other, whatever the situation might be, you're like, yeah, I get it. Jesus died and rose from the grave. Yes, let's celebrate, but I just don't feel like it right now. I can't get myself to be like that. Or maybe you've been affected by the layoffs. And like, maybe once I get another job, then maybe I'll join the parade. But right now, I can't. Or maybe like you're like looking at the political climate, and I'm like, I just can't agree with what's happening. I'm just grieving right now, and I don't know if I could grieve and rejoice at the same time, Paul. So please, I heard about deportations, and one of them was like my family member or my best friend or whatever. Or maybe it's as simple as I can't afford groceries. It's so expensive. I want to eat eggs for breakfast, but I can't, and I can't rejoice without eggs. Like whatever it is. It's like, what if I can't celebrate? And so Paul thinks about that. After he says, I want you to rejoice. I'll say it again, rejoice, but do it in a gentle manner. After he says that, he's like, but I understand. Some of you guys have anxiety. Some of you guys are not feeling right. You guys are losing sleep because at night when you're trying to fall asleep, you're thinking about all the problems in the world, all the problems that you're facing right now, and I just can't. So Philippians 4, verses 6 through 9 addresses that, the very next section, okay? And the very next section is actually about dealing with anxiety. Now, I'm not saying that what he's going to prescribe here is going to fix all your anxiety issues. But from Paul's perspective, he thinks that these are the key things that we need to do. So what he does is he lists two things that we could do that will help us with our anxiety. Two things, okay? And we're going to go over them, and we're going to actually act them out. We're going to practice them today. Not the full version of it, like a condensed version, because we don't have time. Okay, so number one is prayer which in this case feels more like meditation. Okay? And the second thing is this thing called think and do. Think and do. And we're going to go over both of them. So let's start with, next slide, pray, meditation. So this is how Paul starts this section of chapter 4. Do not be anxious about anything. To which a lot of us are like, oh, I'm sorry, that problem solved. Okay, I just won't be anxious. Like, does Paul think that there's like a switch? You know, like when a lot of times I fix computers and stuff, you know, when like my family's like, oh, this is broken, or my parents are like, my phone won't work. I'm that guy in the family that they ask, right? And usually it's like, oh, that's because it's not on. Right? And like it's usually like the simple stuff, right? And so like does Paul think like, oh, like it's like, oh, I'm sorry, Paul. I was anxious because I forgot there was a switch in my life I could just flick off. Oh, look, no more anxiety. Like, do you think it's something that could just switch on and off? Really? And like Paul, please be more sensitive. Well, let's continue. If he says anything of worth here, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. We'll come back to that phrase right there. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. So, okay, let's not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, okay, so give thanksgiving. Okay, so what does that mean? So the key to understanding this verse is this phrase, present your requests. Present your requests. In our language, present your request is 3 words. But in the original language, which this was written in Greek 2,000 years ago, it's actually 1 word. And the word is norizo. Norizo, that's how you write it. It looks like scribble, but that's norizo right there. And norizo means to discover or to reveal. Like you have to excavate. You have to dig deep and find out something there that you didn't see there before. And he says, so I'll give you an example, okay? Let's just say we all have like a major anxiety of, I have a job interview coming up. Well, I don't. I love working here, guys. You know, but let's just pretend that I have a job interview coming up, right? And I'm nervous about it. I'm like super anxious, and I'm like, I don't know. I can't sleep at night. I'm just so nervous about this. And then the question I have to ask myself is, well, why are you nervous? Why is it causing so much anxiety? And when you think about it, you're like, well, maybe it's because, well, I don't have a job right now. I need to get a job. Okay, so why do you need that job? Like, well, is it because, you know, you need money? It's like, that could be it. Another one is, you know, your parents are expecting so much out of you that this is the prestigious job that you have to get, or you bring shame upon your family, whatever the case may be, right? And like, okay, well, why do you care so much about how other people perceive you and your family? You see how we're digging deeper and deeper? And we're going deeper and deeper, and we eventually get to this thing where we're like, oh, maybe it's because I can't control how other people perceive me. And me knowing that I don't have control over every aspect of my life is the thing that's causing anxiety. Once you dig deep and you find that thing, you present it to God and say, Lord, this thing, I just realized I don't have control over my life. And according to Paul, next slide, according to Paul, it says if you give that to God, if you say, Lord, this is what I'm really struggling with, he says that God will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That God will take that and say, yes, thanks for bringing that to me, Kotz. I know that's a very sensitive thing to you. Thank you for entrusting me with the deep, intimate areas of your life. I will guard it for you. Right? So here's the little chart. Paul says, I want you to rejoice. Like, well, I can't rejoice. Why? Because, well, what am I supposed to do? Discover why you are anxious and tell that to God. Right? And he says, if that happens, God will protect your heart. So, but the big issue with us, right, is not the first or the third step. It's this middle step right here, right? Discover why you are anxious and tell God. Like, how do you do that? How do you do that? Right? How do we figure out, you know, what the layers are in our lives? And so you could, you know, some people, they journal, they write things down, and they read it back a few weeks later and like, oh, you know, some people paint or draw, and they try to express their feelings on paper and then or a canvas, and they look back at it and they look at it and say, oh, I see something there. Some people, if you have trusted friends, you talk to your friends about it over coffee, and then your friends ask you some deep questions, and they say like, well, why do you think that is, Kotz? Why do you think you're feeling that way? Well, it's because, you know, or if you have good friends, but they're not really good at asking questions, maybe a therapist. When let's say like about 15 years ago, I saw a therapist, and this person really helped me dig through the layers of why I had so much anxiety in my life. And back when I was in college, I had a mentor who taught me another way of doing this, and that is called, and this is the thing we're going to practice today, it's called the retreat of silence. Retreat of silence. And this isn't the only way to do this, okay? But this retreat of silence is basically, I set aside about 2 hours of my life, and I just sit there, and I don't even pray. I just say, well, it is prayer because I'm asking God something, but I say, hey, God, I'm really anxious about certain things. I ask that you would help me, that you'll just reveal for me what it is. And I just sit there. No music. I'm just sitting there. And, it's been so long since I've done this. Like, I sound like a hypocrite because I'm like, you should do this, and I haven't did it in 15 years. But I'm willing to do it again. But I emailed our spiritual director, Stan, and he said, like, oh, yeah, here's some good exercises to do while you're doing that. And one of the things is, he told me, the most important thing here is to breathe. Like, breathe in, and imagine that you're breathing in, like, the Spirit of God. And as you invite him into your lungs, you're basically saying, hey, Lord, I want you to work through me. I want you to dwell in me. And then you breathe out. Don't forget to breathe out, because then you might pass out. Breathe out. And as you're doing this, okay, if your brain works like mine, it goes like this. You breathe in, and you're asking God, like, what is it? What is it that you want to reveal to me today? And then you realize, oh, I got to do laundry today, right? And then you ask God, like, God, is that from you? Is that from you? And if you feel like, no, it's not, then you breathe out and you say, okay, then I just won't let that go. And then you breathe in again. And maybe something else pops in your head. And it's like, is that from you? And if you feel like it is, you let it sit with you. It might get uncomfortable, but you just sit there. A lot of times when I'm going for walks, I'm always listening to like podcasts, or I'm listening to music. And I realize the reason I do that is because I don't want to deal with those things, right? I'm going for a walk and I'm like, not listening to anything. And all of a sudden I have this thought. I'm like, oh, I got to deal with that in my life. Oh, yeah, I got to apologize to that person. Music. Oh, yeah, okay, I don't have to worry about that, right? A retreat of silence is basically allowing yourself to actually hear the things that might be uncomfortable to you, the things you have to deal with. And then through that, you might actually experience the anxiety, like the root of the anxiety that is causing all this for you. So, we're going to try that right now. Now, we don't have 2 hours. We don't. I wish we did, but we don't. So we're going to do a 2-minute version of this. And what you're going to discover in the next 2 minutes is that when everybody's silent, no music playing, it gets uncomfortable. You start hearing your own breath. You're like, oh, I didn't know that. That's what breathing sounded like, right? But in my experience, after about doing this for an hour, the first hour is very difficult. From the second hour, you wish that it could go longer. You realize, I really need this in my life. So let's try 2 minutes, and I'll try to stay quiet, but I'll give you some instructions along the way. Okay? So let's breathe in. And ask God, please speak to us. What is the root of my anxiety? And breathe out. Okay, let's open our eyes. So please practice this at home. And retreats of silences usually take place in places of nature. And one example that my mentor taught me years ago, 15 years ago, was one time he was sitting there, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a hummingbird just flying in front of him really fast. And he felt like, Lord, are you trying to tell me that I'm working, moving a lot, just working hard, but not really going anywhere? And God spoke to him through the images that he saw during the retreat of silence. By the way, if you fall asleep through this, that's okay. Let yourself fall asleep. because maybe God's trying to reveal to you, your anxiety is coming from the fact that you're not resting enough. And so use this time to rest. So I encourage you guys to do that. I would say do it at least for over an hour. So, all right. So that was Paul's first point, pray or meditate. Okay, dealing with anxiety. Now let's talk about this, think and do. Think and do. So this is another famous verse from Philippians. I don't know why most of the famous verses in Philippians comes from the 4th chapter, but here it is. You've probably heard this before. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Okay, I need you guys to participate here. Say think. Think. Okay, let's say think. There we go. Okay, so he says, I want you to think about these things. Next verse. And he says, whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, which is to do. Say do. Do. Okay, say think. Do. Think. Okay, I want you to remember that. That's why I'm making you say this. I usually don't do this with you guys, but this is so important. Think and do. Okay. And then he says, if you do that, then the God of peace will be with you. God of peace will be with you. Really? So what is he saying? He's saying that this is basically a formula, right? He says this is the formula for anxiety. Number one is, I want you to think. And then if you do, then the answer is, if you put it into practice, then peace of God, the God of peace, is going to be with you, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, really, Paul? Like this, it's that simple? And when I read this, I was like, oh Lord, let this be true. Do you know like how many people have anxiety in this world? Really? Like, Paul, is it really that simple? Right? Like, I know people who wake up in the morning and they look in the mirror and they just feel so discouraged. And there's so much insecurity and there's so much anxiety. What are my friends going to say about me today? How am I going to look like to the people around me? Oh, Lord, if this is true, then, I want it to be true, Or there are people who only hear discouraging words from other people, and it's causing a lot of anxiety. If I could just think and do, then you're saying that the God of peace is going to be with me. Okay, this is great. Okay, so what does this look like? So this is our practice number 2. Okay, we did the meditation thing. Now we're going to practice this. I'm going to read you a story from the Bible. It's from Exodus chapter 1 and parts of chapter 2. And we're going to try this. And then we're going to put it into practice this week. And then maybe you could let me know if it worked next week, okay? So here we go. Here's the story. You could just listen. You could follow along if you want. This is from the Message translation. If you want to read the Bible like a simple story, this is the version of the Bible I recommend. Here we go. In Egypt, the children of Israel kept on reproducing. They multiply like rabbits. They were very prolific, which means they were fruitful and multiplying. A population explosion in their own right, and the land was filled with them. So if you could just imagine, here's Egypt, and a bunch of immigrants came in, and now they're multiplying, right? So how does that make everybody feel? Well, a new king, which is a pharaoh, came to power in Egypt, and he spoke to his people with alarm. There are way too many of these Israelites for us to handle. What should we do? He's causing it. He should think and do and pray. Okay, let's keep going. We've got to do something. Let's devise a plan to contain them, lest if there's a war, they should join our enemies or just walk off and leave us. Like, hey, right now we could kind of handle this. There's more of them, and we're kind of working out this thing, we're at this peace here. But what if somebody comes and invades and they take their side? We're like totally doomed if we do, right? Or they might just leave us. We need them for our economy to work. So what should we do? How do we keep him here but keep him under control? He has an idea. So they organized them into work gangs and put them to hard labor under gang foremen, aka slavery. Let's enslave these people. They built the storage cities, Pithom and Ramses, for Pharaoh. But the harder the Egyptians worked them, the more children the Israelites had, children everywhere. Yeah, plan A didn't work. Okay, let's keep going. So here's plan B. The Egyptians couldn't stand the Israelites and treated them worse than ever, crushing them with slave labor, making bricks and mortar and backbreaking work in the fields. They piled on the work, crushing them under the cruel workload. Let's just work them harder. Make it harder and harder. Next verse. So the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, had a talk with 2 Hebrew midwives. These are women who help bring babies into the world. One of them named Shiphrah, the other one Puah. I love that name, Puah. He said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the sex of the baby, and if it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. That's his plan B. Like, hey, let's just killing off babies. I love the next part. But the midwives had far too much respect for God. In the original language, they had a fear of God, meaning they feared God more than they feared their own Egyptian leader, and didn't do what the king of Egypt ordered. They let the boy babies live, and the king of Egypt called in the midwives. Why didn't you obey my orders? You let those babies live. It was simple. If it's a boy, kill. Girl, live, right? Why didn't you do it? Their excuse? The midwives answered Pharaoh, oh, the Hebrew women aren't like Egyptian women. They're vigorous. To which the Hebrew women are like, amen. Okay, before the midwives can get there, they've already had the baby. Like, hello? Oh, you're in labor? I'll be right there. Oh, what? Oh, you gave birth. Okay. Like, like these women, they know how to pop them out, right? Okay. God was pleased with the midwives because they cared more about the babies than following the rules of the Pharaoh. The people continued to increase in number, a very strong people. And because the midwives honored God, God gave them families of their own. Let's keep going. So Pharaoh issued a general order to all his people, Plan C. Every boy that is born, drown him in the Nile. But to let the girls live. It's like, okay, so if we can't stop them at birth, let's kill the babies now. All right, let's go to chapter 2. A Levite woman became pregnant and had a son. This character, the son, Moses, just so you guys know. She saw there was something special about him and hid him. She hid him for 3 months. Remember, all the babies are being killed. Let's protect this baby. Keep going. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she got a little basket boat made of papyrus, waterproofed it with tar and pitch, and placed the child in it. Then she set it afloat in the reeds at the edge of the Nile. If you saw the Prince of Egypt, you know exactly. You could imagine in your head, right? Tear, right? Okay, let's keep going. The baby's older sister found herself a vantage point a way off, and watched to see what would happen to him. Pharaoh's daughter came down to the Nile to bathe. Her maiden strolled on the bank. She saw the basket boat floating in the reeds and sent her maids to get it. It's like, oh, there's a basket. Go get it. Okay. She opened it and saw the child, a baby crying. Her heart went out to him. She said, this must be one of the Hebrew babies. So it's not like, oh, look, a baby. Don't know what race it is. Let's just adopt it. It's like, we know exactly this is one of the babies that are supposed to be killed, but I'm going to take the baby in. Then his sister, Moses, was before her. Do you want me to go and get a nursing mother from the Hebrews so she can nurse the baby for you? Pharaoh's daughter said, yes, go, right? And the girl went and called the child's mother. So the mother is like, I'm going to protect this baby as long as I can. Oh, I can't protect it anymore, so I'm just going to let it go. And now, like, Pharaoh's daughter gets the baby, and it's like, oh, you want someone to take care of it? It's like, yeah, I know, Mom, that would be happy to. And so she basically is caring for her own child. And not only that, next verse, Pharaoh's daughter told her, take this baby and nurse him for me. I will pay you. Like, now you get to be the mom and you get paid for it. Man, that's awesome. The woman took the child and nursed him. Okay, so that's the story. Okay, so the first step is this. Think. So if you've been a part of my Bible study, some of these things might just stand out to you. If you were with us for the past few weeks. The phrase fruitful and multiplied, that sounds like something we heard before in the book of Genesis. Do you guys know where that phrase comes from?
Genesis.
Yeah, we're in Genesis. The first time we hear this phrase? Be fruitful, multiply. Yep, in the garden, right. So the author of Exodus puts in the word be fruitful, multiply, like the Israelites are be fruitful and multiplying. They put that in there to make you think, oh, this is like a creation story. And when God created the world, it was good. So when the ancient Hebrews heard this story and they see that phrase, they're thinking, oh, so this is a creation story. Oh, that something new is about to happen, and God is going to see that it is good. See, that's what's going through your mind if you're a Hebrew reader, right? Another thing interesting here is the word for basket. The word basket there is a special word in the Bible because this word is only used one other place in the Bible. Do you guys know what word this is? The word for basket is the same word for ark that Noah was on. So like when they get to this story, it's like, why would they put a baby in an ark? It's like, I think they meant basket, but why is this author using the word ark instead of just a basket, right? So when you get there, you're like, oh, so this isn't just a creation story. This is also a Noah story. And what does Noah represent? Well, he's like hope for new creation, something new. Where there's wickedness in the world, there's this one beacon of light. So as you're thinking about these passages, you're thinking, oh, so this is what the author's trying to tell us, right? And maybe when we were reading through this, you're like, Shiphrah and Puah, that's interesting that they give names to these women when we don't even know the name of the most powerful person in this story, which is Pharaoh. Pharaoh doesn't have a name, but these two midwives have a name, right? And you're like, oh, maybe this is God's way of saying, like, in God's eyes, people with power don't mean a thing. But the people who are trying to save lives, they are the ones that matter to God, right? So you start thinking. So think, right? Now, as you heard this story, ask this question. Who or what in the story was true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, or praiseworthy? Some of you guys might be thinking, oh, like Moses' mom. She sacrificed her own life to protect her baby. That sounds lovely and pure. That sounds admirable. That sounds praiseworthy, right? Or maybe you're thinking about Moses' sister. She's acting like an espionage thing. She's spying, like, okay, there's my brother. There's my brother. Like, Mom, Moses is going into the Pharaoh's court. Oh, yeah. Oh, hey, I could get you a job, Mom. Want me to do that for you? Okay, I'm going to get you a job right now. You're going to get paid for being his mom, right? Like, maybe that's who you're like, oh, that is so praiseworthy. That is so pure. That is so, right? Or for you, and maybe for a lot of you, because for me this was the case, Shiphrah and Puah, that they feared God more than the leader, than the Pharaoh. And so they decided to save the life of the baby. They defied the Pharaoh because they believed that that was the right thing to do. So, now that we've thought about these things, so let's just say we thought about, you know what, Shiphrah and Puah, they are the ones that are in the story that's noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy. Next step, do, right? Remember, think. Oh, I lost you guys. One more time. Think and do. Thank you, right? Told you it's important, okay? So once you realize this is what I have to do, be Shiphrah and Puah for somebody this week. When everybody's telling you to do the wrong thing, do the right thing for them instead. Or if you want to be like the mother in this story, even when it's really hard, do your best to protect people. Serve them. And then Paul says, if you do those two things, think and do, then the God of peace will be with you. Here's a rabbi. His name is Rabbi Abraham Heschel. He's like a very famous rabbi. He worked with Dr. King. He says a Jew, and I'm pretty sure Rabbi Heschel will be okay if I add Christian here, but a Jew and a Christian is asked to take a leap of action rather than a leap of thought. And what does he mean by that? Next part. He is asked to do more than he understands in order to understand more than he does. So what he means by this is, next slide, this equation here, think, do, and that will add to this, right? What he's saying is, when you are going to do something and you don't understand why you're supposed to do it, like, I guess I'm supposed to be like Shiphrah and Puah this week, I'm just going to do it. And when you do it and then you feel the presence of God in your life, then you start to understand, oh, so that's why I had to do this. The understanding comes with doing, not you understand first and then you do. You do it and then you start to understand why you had to do it in the first place. Right? So, one more time. Think, right? Think. Basically be like, this looks true, this looks lovely, this looks noble, this looks pure, this looks admirable, okay, then you do. So I'm going to go and do that for somebody around me. And Paul says, if you do those things, then the God of peace will be with you. So, this is our experiment. Go and do this week. And if you want, you don't have to. If you want, you could come back next week and tell me, hey, this is what I saw in my life. I got to experience the peace of God. Okay? So, just to recap right here, next slide. Dealing with anxiety. We have to learn how to pray and how to meditate. And then think about what we can do. Whatever is noble, whatever is pure, whatever is praiseworthy, do those things. Amen? All right, let's pray.